Now, after King David's committing adultery with Bathsheba and arranging the murder of her husband Uriah, Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, it who is of the past, continuing into the present and in the future, which has already begun in the present, who cannot be pinned down, cannot be defined, does not involve any defining essence, who cannot be controlled, the ever-present Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, ever becoming what it will, what it does become, is becoming, who is almost unnameable, indeed has no conventional name, whose name, as much as it can be named at all, is almost unpronounceable. Only once a year the Kohen Gadol pronounces the correct pronunciation, which we've lost, we don't know anymore, for Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, the name revealed at the burning bush, at the Sneh, Sinai. Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, related to Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. What is your name? Moshe asks. The people will ask me, who sent you? What is the name of this God, of this ultimate? And the divine evades the question, because there is no name that defines the essence, defines that divinity is infinite, is this and that, all the spirot and opposites and beyond. Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, at the burning bush. All right, you want a name? Tell them that Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Tell them Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Tell them I am becoming what I am becoming, who I am becoming. Sent me. Well, when King David, after he had committed adultery with Bathsheba and arranging the murder of her husband Uriah, Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, none other than this Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, sent Natan to David. And indeed, yes, I'm reading from our text from last week in my translation. And indeed he came to him, and he said to him, a legal case is arisen, and I need to ask your advice. You see, two men there were in the same city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had sheep and cattle, many, very many of them. But the poor man, nothing at all, nothing whatsoever did he have, except for one small lamb, which he acquired and sustained, nourished, and it grew up with him, and grew up among his children, together with them. From his poor bread, she ate the lamb, and from his drink she drank. And in nestling against his chest, she lay down, and she was to him like a daughter, like Lassie, or in the movies, but or in literature about the dogs that Yes, my dog, Lady. I don't know. When I was a kid, we brought her from the Animal Rescue League. Actually, we'll be exploring this a little bit in our coming week with Mordechai Martin Buber's help. This meaning encountering animals, and they're encountering us, you see. I don't know, do I have a photo here or one of my drawings of Lady? It was Lady and the Tramp, in the Walt Disney movies. Here. Yes. Can you see? Here she is. Yes. Yeah, that's a photo. Yeah. They said that she was a short-haired fox terrier. Just kind of like a fox, So it was, this lamb was to this poor man, quite like our relationship with with dogs and with animals that can develop. Well, now a wayfarer, a traverser, came to the man who was rich. But he thought it a pity, taking from his own sheep and from his own cattle, to make them something, make something for the guest who had come to him, to make a supper of them. So he took the lamb of the poor man and brought it. He slaughtered the lamb and prepared it for meal, and he gave it for the man, the visitor, who came to him. That's the legal case, King David, that has come up, and I wanted to ask your advice about it. The prophet Nathan says to David. Now, David became flaringly angry against the rich man in the story. Very intensely angry, and he said to Nathan, "By the life of Yud-He Vav-He, I swear, I take an oath, that a disciple already a resident of the realm of death, any man who does this, any person who does it, is deserving of death. As for the lamb, he must pay 4 times its value in consequence of his bringing about this happening, this result, and because he didn't spare the poor man's lamb, because he didn't take pity on the poor man's lamb and the poor man's relationship with the lamb." Then, so Nathan gives this story, tells the story, a court case, a legal case. Was it a specific legal case? Of course, many legal cases are about the wealthy getting away with murder on the backs of the poor and the struggling. But so it's a type of case that could come up. It kind of sounds as though he's made it up a bit. He's tailored it specifically for his purpose, as a metaphor, as a symbol for what David has done. And so Nathan tells him the story, and David responds. He says he should have to pay, many times over the value of the lamb, but in a way that the lamb is valueless. So really, his guilt is very high, very deep, very serious indeed. Then Nathan, the prophet, Hanavi, the one who brings, the one who is carried, Navi, the one who brings what he carries within him of Devar Yud-He Vav-He, the communication from Yud-He Vav-He. Nathan says to David, the Hebrew is wonderful. It took me 3 words or 5 words, to translate. Nathan just says one thing to him. Ata Haish. Fantastic. All this commotion, all this. It's not unlike Gustav Mahler's Resurrection Symphony. Yeah. This picture of Mahler, Gustav Mahler. This picture of Gustav Mahler. And yes, in Gustav Mahler's Resurrection Symphony, it begins with just immediately like that. And it continues for like 30 minutes of instrumental music. Yes, instrumental music. Yeah, can you see we're violining right now? instrumental music for like 30 minutes. But in the middle of the stage, there are two chairs. And seated in the chairs are two women. When I saw it at Tanglewood, it was the summer, and so the Boston Symphony Orchestra, everyone was dressed in white, and Seiji Ozawa, the conductor, dressed in white, and the choir in the back dressed in white. And then these women came out, these two soloists, vocalists. One was wearing this wonderful purple, gown, and the other this gold kind of, color gown. And they sat down, and they just sat there for 30 minutes in these chairs on the edge of this, it's called the skirt, the apron of the stage. And the instrumental music went on and on. And then suddenly, one of them stands up, and she starts singing. Oh, about the rose. I showed you that passage on video, my first video for the voiceless teachers, the silent teachers, that a pine cone can be a teacher, that music can be a teacher, that a flower can be a teacher, that candles can be, Shabbat candles can be a teacher, etc. And she starts singing, oh, rose, with its beautiful blossoms, but also thorns. Oh, human beings, so many struggling, suffering with outer, external kinds of sufferings and inner ones. And then just that lone voice. And I feel that here, well, I've got this court case, and it goes on with the story, and the tempo is quite, yes, it's going on, and it's flowing, and it's, yes, and then King David is now it's not just flowing, it's, it's like the rapids when you go in the water with these, canoes or these, what are they called, and you've now made a turn from flowing waters, but now even surging, and King David is very upset. Well, that's terrible what he did. That rich man should have to, and talk to himself, hey, and then the prophet just says two words, Atah Ha'ish. The story is about you. You are the rich man in the story. And in a sense, you're the poor man also in the story. Because by being the rich man and the oppressor, you have oppressed yourself as well. Yourself now is as the poor man. But essentially, that's the brunt of it is Atah Ha'ish. You're the rich man. You're the one who committed adultery. You're the one who arranged for the murder. All literature, this is literature. This is what a story, so-called, is. I prefer to refer to stories of this kind, which is all great stories, in literature, novels, the Bible, Shakespeare, rabbinic midrash. I prefer to refer to them as dramas. Because a drama, every person knows that even if King Lear, didn't exist historically, the truths, the ethical, psychological, philosophic, spiritual truths that are conveyed, that are explored and conveyed by such a play, are incredibly true. And they challenge us. They challenge us. Atah Ha'ish. Atah Ha'ish. How did it happen in the story, the drama? Drama, yes? Of the Alter Rebbe, yes? Where the Alter Rebbe, as the story goes, here it is. No, as the story goes, why then, said the tzaddik, in every era, God calls to every person, where are you in your world? So many years and days of those allotted to you have passed, and how far have you gotten in your world? God says something like this, you have lived 46 years. How far along are you? When the chief of the guards, or if you want, the minister of government, when he heard his age mentioned, he pulled himself together, laid his hand on the Rav's shoulder, and cried, "Bravo! Very good. Well, you knew that." But his heart trembled. He knew. You see, now and there are variations. We know this is a fact, at least from the mid-19th century on, because we had anthropologists and sociologists and everybody looking at stories that people tell and that the ancient peoples tell. And all stories, we find the variants. There are variants. Well, because, for one thing, I mean, they were first oral. So there wasn't one set, each storyteller told it as he heard it or she. And added to it. I mean, the person adding it to it, the storyteller, didn't feel that was against, that was betraying the truth. Because he or she understood that the truth is the philosophy of life through the story, by means of the drama, by means of the levushim, the garments within which the truths are clothed, so that we might understand them and feel them much more deeply than just prose can do, than just history of science can do. Though history and science do address the question they address of how and of process beautifully, and very often, though half of our lives is all about, if not more, the how of process, the practical. It's wonderful. It increases our dignity to be able to have more control over our external, physical, literal environment, which science, which medicine, which knowledge of history can afford us. But this is still very different from poetry and art, literature, music, religion. There are another kind of questions being addressed. The question not of how, but why. The question not of process, but of purpose. And so it addresses that question in some different ways. All literature, all these stories, these dramas, they take place in the past or science fiction in the future. And they're about other people, seemingly. But Aristotle said long ago in his book, The Poetics, which is about the philosophy of literature, how literature works, that literature gives us a story about what happened, but to other people. But it's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. It's about what is always happening for human beings in all times. Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. Many children learn this in America, North America, and throughout the world, translation, whatever. The Road Not Taken. But it's really not about roads in Vermont or New Hampshire. It's not what it's about, even though the surface of the words is about that. Tells us that, the plot. But that poem is about life choices, as they say, because there's not one meaning, to poetry, to metaphor. Well, Ata Ish, you're the one that it is about. And King David, what does he say? Well, then the Natan continues after these two words, Ata Ish. We had that in the John Singer Sargent preparatory work for his mural in the Boston Public Library. I don't know if you can see that, but it's I shared it with you last week. Yes, in the discussion forum. And here what we see, maybe this helps, maybe it hurts, I don't know, this light. What we see is they're walking towards us. Us. The prophets are walking towards us, and they're kind of like this. It's about you. as Martin Buber says in the Bible, it is always our life that is being addressed, and in the Midrash, etc. Well, thus, he, is, she, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. I say it because it's not like a human being. It's nothing like a human being. The divine, the reality, we call the divine. Thus it has said, none other than Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, the divinity of Israel, the divine as Israel has come to know it. It is I who anointed you as king over Israel, and it is I who rescued you from the clutches of Shaul. I am the one who gave to you the house of your Lord and the women of your Lord into your taking to your chest embrace. And I am the one who gave to you the house of Israel and Judah. And if this were not enough, if this were too little for you, I am the one who added to you still further and further and more. Why then have you so held in contempt the communicated oracle, the Greek, would translate into Greek, the communicated oracled word that seeks, persists, demands to become realized as deed, as act of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, concerning what is wrong in his eyes. Uriah the Hittite, you have struck down by means of the sword, and his wife you have taken for yourself as a wife. Indeed, you have killed him by the sword, of the Ammonites. Therefore, from now on, ha-cherev, the sword, will not turn away from your house continuously in consequence. There are consequences to David, even for kings. And in the end, you're not a king really anyway. Because there's only one king. And it's not because I'm a megalomaniac. It's not because I'm egotistical that I say to you, I'm the only one. It's only to help you, so you won't become enslaved by all kinds of everything else, which can only be false sources of any ultimate meaning or truth. Everything else will be idolatry, and even ways in which too often most religionists of all religions, religious traditions, persuasions, civilizations, even the way they relate to me and understand me, is to make me into an idol, to make me be that which serves them, which helps them, whereas they should be serving me. Thus, Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, the divine communication, continues, has said, even now, he, she, it says, take notice how I am rising up against you, catastrophic wrong from out of your own house, such that I will take your women right before your eyes, and I will give them to your fellow, and he will lie with your wives before the eyes of the sun in broad daylight of day, that all will see. For you have acted, brought about what you have done in secret. Or you thought it was in secret. You thought it was hidden from the eyes of the sun. But I will bring about this prophetic word become deed, become realized, in the full view of all Israel, and in the full view of the sun. You thought you were doing this in secret. And you thought you could get away with it. But you know, the word that repeats here 3 times. Sword, sword, sword. You took up the sword, sword. And so, that's the natural consequence. It's not me sitting there sometime, the divine, and saying, oh, this would be a good day to, punish to be. No. It's built into the laws of psychology, of history, of our actions, of our feelings, of our thoughts. As individuals and as groups, there are consequences. You have taken up the sword. And so the consequence is you've introduced violence into your own house. Well, now they're learning. Your children, your generals, and will turn around to your own harm. How does King David respond? How does he respond? Chatati